Hello there, Lol Coach Gaby here. I did peak Grandmaster with 700 plus LP this season, and last year I was a challenger. And I want to make a Oriana specific guide because she's quite good right now. But as I noticed, most of the players don't actually quite know what to build, how to play Oriana. So we will cover actually pretty much everything about this champion. And just so that I'm gonna prepare you guys, this will be a longer but rather detailed videos that you really need to watch if you want to master Oriana. It really won't be one of those like 5-10 minute videos where you're gonna learn some things. It's pretty much about everything you need to know about the champion. So first of all, I want to talk about the identity of Oriana itself before we get into the abilities, just to understand what's the champion about if you have no clue how Oriana functions. So the goal of Oriana is just pretty much more than often to scale, but you actually can harass people in lane, of course. Um, we can visually see that she is a supportive champion as well, because she does provide movement speed to her allies, armor and magic resist, and the shield, of course, of her E. So she does have a similar supportive kit to Sona, because Sona does speed up people, Sona does actually shield people, while also Sona does have a similar stun ability on her ultimate as Oriana does, of course. Now, she won't you won't be able to necessarily kill people early on, usually common line around level 6, but more than often you are sort of a supportive champion till you actually get to kill people. So this is not like one of those instant dopamine early game champs, if that's what you're looking for. So pretty much it I think we covered. She's usually like sort of a supportive champion. Her goal is just to like more than often just to team fight or look for picks. She's also good at looking for picks, of course. If there is a jungler like Kha'Zix around, he could go invisible or Shaco. Then he could ult someone, of course, out of nowhere because they don't even see that. So she's pretty much like versatile at what she can do. She can look for picks. She can of course team fight. She's a bit more versatile, of course. She's not necessarily that bad at side laning. Um, but let's get straight up into the abilities part of the champion and what can this champion actually do? How does this champion even work? So I got level, it doesn't really matter the level now, but I just got level 10, let's get level 11, but it's really not about the levels. Maybe let's get boots so we walk a little bit smoother, I guess, but it's not really about that. Right now we just present the abilities. So, uh, okay, so what the hell do you start on Oriana? What do you max? Do you Q max? Do you W max? What do you max? What's worth to max? So look. We can see it with our eyes. If we max our Q, the damage, the mana cost gonna increase, the cooldown gonna decrease. Now the W, if you're gonna max your W, the damage again gonna be higher than before, right? We can see W does scale damage wise better. It gets 40, not 30 damage, and the cooldown also doesn't decrease apparently, but the slow and the movement speed does increase, same as the mana. So the mana does increase, okay. Now, one thing to watch out about Oriana's Q, that it's not only, it's written Oriana commands her ball to move to an area dealing X amount of damage to surrounding enemies, but one thing is not written, that it actually reveals bushes. It actually does reveal bushes in a wide area. So what does that mean? As Oriana, you can stay at a very safe distance, or you can cover two parts of the early game. So for example, if they have a trash, right? Or some type of Lux or anything, let's say Lux, anything that has like a ability that could root you, stun you, and allow the enemy team to get a kill. You can cover two sides with Oriana, which is a really nice thing into invaders, to be able to cover two sides, which means that normally other champs don't get to do this, right? If my ball is not in the bush, we don't see if there are like 10 people in here, right? 5 people, right? So that's a very helpful tool, but generally speaking, what you want to do with Oriana into invading teams, if your team is not the best at counter invading, is often just leave your ball and just observe what the enemy team is doing, right? You can also do something like this as well, in case they are invading from this side, so this is also again totally fine to do. This also gonna allow you to sort of like see stuff while also you stay at a relatively safe distance. So usually early on level 1 you wanna use your Q as a scouting tool, and it costs only like 30 mana, 35 mana, so don't worry about the mana cost, you're gonna regenerate it by the time the minions are coming up. So it's really good, important to note that you never face check on Oriana. This costs no mana. You should use your Q to check pushes per usual. Now, okay, let's max out these abilities. So if we are looking at our Q, we can visually see that it does 30% less damage to enemies that are hit after the first target. So we can see it with our eyes. Let's just see it with our eyes, of course. We see that the second one took a bit less damage than the first one, right? We can see it with our eyes, right? We can see it with our own eyes. So what does that mean? If you have the opportunity, aim to poke differently in lane. What does it even mean? So, for example, if the minions are spawning, right, and there is a champion, if you can angle your Q in a way that it doesn't go through a minion but sort of hits the enemy champion, then you're gonna get more damage value out of it. So if you possibly get an angle for it, then do so. Aim to just like hit the first target, right? Hit the enemy champion instead of trying to like get a Q through the whole wave, because sometimes maybe you don't want to over push the wave. Depends what do you want to do with the wave, of course. So it's more recommended if you can angle your Q a little bit, because it's better to actually walk a teensy bit around and to get a higher damage Q instead of lowering your damage by 30%. So that's an important thing to watch out for. Now, your Q has a bigger complexity as well because it synergizes with all of the other abilities. One thing I didn't point out, of course, it has a leash range, so if you bypass this range, then of course what's gonna happen is that your ball will actually just come back to you, right? That's an important thing to watch out for, but you can also do some fancy tricks like this. You can... I messed it up. So you can even do stuff like this. Look, you can ult, and even if you're out of its range, your ult will go off. So and this is a very important trick, of course, to do when you set your ball on someone else with your E, but I'm gonna present that soon later on. So W. You can use it on yourself, or it goes off. It always goes off your ball, right? Which means that wherever your ball is, that's where your W will go off, right? And so more than often this can be used as sort of a zoning tool if you're trying to escape, because it's very hard to like chase Oriana through some smaller gaps. So this is also quite important to use it in areas where you're sort of wanna disengage from the enemy team in some case scenarios, because this will slow quite hard later on. But also this ability is very good to use to just simply disengage your allies. So aim to actually EW your allies, right, if you can. Let's say like someone is chasing your Nico or something, and you want to like W them, right? Now, if you don't necessarily need the shield, you can also spare the mana, and you can just Q W, right? That actually can spare you the mana, because Q costs a teensy bit less mana. So if you want to be a bit smarter about it, you could actually just like press your Q on the ground and W, and that should be fine enough if they can gap close. So if they can gap close because of the speed itself, then maybe your ally doesn't need the shield. So we can like hold into our shield and use it more wisely, right? Okay, now another important thing to note that it's written that ally is gonna be speeded up. So what does that even mean, Gaby? You can actually speed up your own minion wave. Good. Cool little trick. So what does that allow you to do? So look, let's say hypothetically the enemy mid laner, usually they play shit ton of assassins, or even LeBlanc is roaming, like many mid laners are roaming, like Tristana, right? Midlane is all about roaming. Now, one thing you can do, usually your Tristana will clear, of course, the wave, and that will usually mean that you can't actually take the tower down in time. So if you have lots of mana, you can be a bit more tricky, and you can actually speed up the wave's mobility a few times. So you actually might be able to snatch away a plate, because the faster they arrive, certainly the faster you can also push the enemy tower. So if you have the mana for that, definitely do so. You wipe the wave really quick. By the way, don't ever use your ult like that, of course, on the wave. You just wipe really quick the wave, and it's more likely that you can actually swing in some basic attacks in here, and aim to actually just kind of like get the plate before the enemy Tristana arrives. But this is a niche thing. It's more important to speed up the wave if everyone else is dead and your team wants to siege, of course. So then you should actually not wait for the wave. You should speed it up, especially if they are buffed by the Baron, of course. Now, from the other hand, this does also buff or speed up like summons, any type of summons, I do believe, because it says allies. which means you're gonna speed up a daisy or you're gonna speed up a certain thing, certain summon that your teammate has, which is important in some case scenario because it will allow your Ivan to connect his root, and when he not root knock up from daisy, right, and then he can connect right after his root just because you speeded up the golem. So sometimes that speed up differential would actually matter quite a lot. Okay, now we pretty much talked about like the mostly like we described W, you know, it's a very easy like tool to use, but sometimes you don't want to QW. Now this is a bit more tricky as well because more than often this is the Oriana combo, right? QW, basic. It's a very basic type of trading tool, right? But often you're gonna face champions like Yasuo or Fizz. These champions have dashes, so what will happen? For example, if there is a Visor Yasuo or a Visor Fizz, if you try to QW them, they are possibly looking for an E. Like this is a Fizz, maybe he's looking to E into you, Q into you, if that's ever a possibility for him. Or Katarina, what have you. So often you wanna Q in, and if they are dashing away, you don't wanna give up your W for no reason, because they could dash away. As soon as they see your ball, they will dash away, so you're just gonna waste your mana, you waste your cooldown, and sometimes they're gonna dash on you. Now, in those case scenarios, you want to actually just Q in, don't use W, maybe basic attack if you can. Again, W yourself, E yourself, I mean, and then W yourself, of course, eh? So this is like a matchup specific thing where you kind of want to hold into it. Or for example, into Sivir as well, you can Q in, but maybe you don't want to W because she's just going to soak it with her E, if that does make sense. But sometimes you want to W because then you can ult right after, of course. So it depends on the situation, of course. Again, some specific champions like Malzahar, again, I'm gonna go a little bit into specific matchups like Malzahar. So you wanna Q in, but you don't wanna instantly W if you can. You gotta wait a teensy bit because, for example, Malzahar specifically takes 90% less damage on his passive. Malzahar fandom. I want it so you guys can see it with your own eyes, of course. We scroll down a bit and we can see that for 0.25 seconds, he is actually taking 90% damage reduction and has 100% crowd control immunity, which means your W won't upfront slow, but right after it will. So just a very teensy bit you're gonna wait when you're against Malzahar. Okay, then you're gonna W just a tiny bit, like something like this, and then you can do it, right? Just wait those 0.25 seconds off, you know. Okay, so at most I think I explained this ability, of course. At most, as I said, you can use it around terrain, of course, around smaller gaps. Again, I think pretty much it. I think pretty much that's really it, right? Yeah, I think that's really it. If there is something else, of course, in the comment section, make sure to leave a comment about it in case I forgot to explain something about this ability. Now let's move on to the E ability. Now this ability does actually provide armor and magic resist, while also it can deal damage to champions. So just to be clear, it's a shield ability, I know it, but it actually can deal damage to the enemy champion if it's positioned behind them. Look, it does actually 67 damage, so this can actually deal also damage. It's not only about protecting, but you gotta be careful how do you use it. For example, if you Q like this, you drag it back, it did not deal any damage. It has to go through the enemy champion, so it has to be a bit behind them, right? So this is what, like, right, you see, it didn't actually, right? It didn't actually damage it. Now, depends of course on the hitbox of the enemy champion. If they have a bigger hitbox than this dummy, usually they have, it means that it will deal damage anyways, even if it's in front of them, but it depends on their hitbox or if they are walking towards you or not, right? But usually it's better if it's a bit behind them. Now this E has a higher skill floor, which I want to showcase it to you guys, of course, of how the hell do you use this E. So often in mid-late game, or even after level 6, of course, even after level 6, let's say your jungler is ganking you or you want to play around your engager, it doesn't necessarily have to be a jungler. So just to be clear, you can use, when you're Malphite, when you're whatever, like Nocturne is ulting it, Warwick, what, you know, it can be anything really, goes in. You can actually use your ult in midair, which makes it that it actually does arrive a little faster, the ultimate. So you saw he's actually not quite ulting when he's exactly on top of them, just slightly earlier, because his ult has a slight delay before it goes up. We can see it. It's not quite instant, right? It's not quite instant. And that's what you kind of want to do, right? So we saw the circle here, but it went up here because it's like preemptively used because it has a cast time, right? But you got to have some type of communication with your teammates or a little bit of a reaction time, of course, for this. Okay, so pretty much like if you have an engager, melee engager, sometimes you wanna speed them up as well, right? So it depends on the situation, because this has synergy with your W ult, of course. So in some case scenarios, when you eat someone, right, you wanna speed them up actually, so they can get close. For example, you have a Jax, just an example, right? You have a Jax in here and the enemy champion is running away. Let's say it's maybe a Zeri or something, right? Now let's say that Zeri has more mobility than, of course, your Jax, so he cannot connect his EQ. That sucks, right? Or Sivir, right? She also has a lot of mobility. Now what would you do? You have to speed them up. You actually have to speed them up so they can actually get close and get on top of the enemy champion, right? So that's what you have to do with your EW, of course. Sivir is ending the game and I have to turn off the minions. So that this just generally will allow you to sort of just synergize with your engagers. So you should not only use it as a defensive tool, but also very offensively, because this usually means that your engager is looking to go in and just pretty much just you want to allow him to engage with W, or you want to ult, right? Which is of course like a very important skill to have. More than often, it's weird, even in Master, Grandmaster Plus, for some reason I have to tell my Oriana players to actually E me. I will engage in with my dash, I don't know why, it just happens. So it's really important to actually E your engager in fights and just sort of just allow them to go in. Now note that your E is actually invisible when you, of course, you're gonna E a Shaco or a Kha'Zix, and when they go invisibly in, you can actually ult off your you can ult off the invisibility and they won't actually see that, which is a very good thing. They won't see the ball. Now, from the other hand, let's move on to the ultimate. I think pretty much that's pretty much it. I think I covered at most the ball. As I showcased it before, of course, this is really the ball itself. So as I said, you can like totally like ult even if you walk out of its range, because what's gonna happen is that the ult will go off anyway, so you don't have to worry if a champion dashes out in your team out of your E range. You can just preemptively cast it when they're about to get out of it, you know. Okay, so we talked about this. Now let's get to the ultimate. So what does this ultimate do? How do we use this ultimate? So this ultimate pulls champions together. Oriana commands her ball to unleash a shockwave, right? It deals a certain amount of magic damage, right? This been buffed through time, so it means it's a bit stronger right now. The AP ratio, the flat damage is higher, damage to nearby enemies and knocking them in the direction of the ball, right? So it goes in the direction of the ball, right? So it usually pulls them towards the ball, but if you want to, it can also push them away from you, right? So it really depends how do you want to use your ultimate. You want to pull them, that's fine. You want to push them, that's fine. So it's usually they will go towards the ball, right? They will go towards the ball, right? So it really depends on what do you want to do per moment, right? Now there's like a niche little trick, you know, you can do. Here's the ball, here is the enemy champion. This thing doesn't actually pulse champions through small walls. I thought it may gonna do it, but apparently it does not work that way. That's totally fine. So there are some abilities that don't do it, but oddly enough Maokai's Q does, but Oriana's ult doesn't, which again can totally happen. It may be a bug, or it just may be like an intended mechanic in the game, of course. It can be totally anything actually. It can be totally anything. Usually this type of pull abilities do, but Oriana specifically ultimate doesn't, so if you try to do that, you're just gonna waste your ultimate. Now another cool little thing you can do with your ultimate, you ult yourself, right? Or an ally champion. So both you and your ally champion can do this trick. When you ult yourself, you can actually flash in and surprise your opponents, right? So you kind of wanna like ult, flash in, QW, get your combo off, maybe E as well if you need, and this will definitely surprise the enemy champion if you wanna just surprise them and finish them off, of course. With your team, of course, you gotta have some type of communication, because if you just E your ally, the champion, you know, whatever engager you have in the jungle, let's say like you have a Briar with flash, then you gotta like tell her that if I ult you need to flash in, so you gotta communicate it off, because in low elo they don't get it. Why does Oriana ult, right? It's unexpected for your teammates and you're gonna waste your ult, so you can have to like communicate with them that you gotta dash in when I ult, or you gotta like sort of like flash in, right? That's like a very important thing to know. Now, this ult does actually control really well certain areas. For example, when you are sieging, right? So I already talked about the Q, but this is sort of connected to your Q and to your ultimate, right? So it's sort of both because they are just like the same, like they function in a similar way because they depend on each other. So often when you are sieging with your team, let's say we got Baron, we are sieging, or we are just pushing a tower, right? You can place the ball in a very disgusting way. This is a very disgusting way of placing your ball. Now, why is it a disgusting way of placing your ball? This ult will pull everyone around this area of the tower. So they are forced to stay in this area where people are usually getting sandwiched, right? Now the issue with that area is that you could do this as well, right? So you want to actually not have the ball on yourself when you're sieging or when you're bullying under tower, of course. You want to place your ball in a more offensive position. For example, even if you're CSing, you don't want the ball to be permanently close to you. You want it, of course, to be in a more so offensive position. That's true when you're trading, especially into melee matchups. But your goal overall, like it functionally like works the same way around like every single tower, of course. But also note that in here it's like very easy to hit a W as well. So if you're not poke, but that's just like something that's just common sense. So I don't think so I have to mention it. So often, as I said, you wanna place it in a zoning position, your ball, so you can siege because people can bypass. So we see the bit of our ultimate. I'm gonna place a ward here. They can't really bypass this area, right? And positioning here, as I said, it's kind of bad because if your teammates have some type of wall CC, like a Poppy or something, it's hard to walk there, right? Or if they have some type of like single like some type of ability like a blitzcook or something, because in here it's kind of hard to sidestep things, right? We can see like if you walk here, you kind of sandwich yourself, right? You kind of sandwich yourself because you can't walk up and down properly. You're kind of sandwiching yourself actually, even when the tower is destroyed, of course. So it's actually kind of hard to like sidestep to the left or to the right, so you're kind of forced to like walk all the way. So like this, you're just sandwiching yourself. Okay, now alternative zoning positions, of course, this can be totally fine. You can also be a little bit of a sneak as well. You can do stuff like this, or you can do stuff like this. It actually goes inside of the wall. It goes inside of the wall, but it doesn't provide the most proper vision. It will provide vision on our side, right? But it won't provide vision on the other side. Even if you dominantly place it on the other side, it won't provide proper vision for some reason. Now the cool thing about this trick is that you can go for, similar to Gragas's Q barrel, you can sort of hide your Q inside of the wall. I'm not 100% sure if the enemy team sees the ball inside of the wall or not. I'm not 100% sure in that, but if they have Fog of War around that wall, they're not supposed to see it. For example, you have clear vision of the enemy, whatever champion walking that area, right? Like, I don't know, maybe they are just trying to get close, right? And then you're gonna ult them, you're gonna surprise them, right? Then your team could also follow up, arguably, right? So you can go for sort of hidden techniques in here, right? You can also sort of hide, of course, in like walls such as this, but again, like this is one thing I'm 100% sure in. If people and the enemy champions can see it, they can see Kraga's Q, but I'm not sure with Oriana's Q. That's something I'm not sure about, so definitely you guys have to ask around Oriana mains, and they may be able to tell you guys some exacts about this, but it's still kind of sneaky because often people just won't like notice it if they don't have like vision over this side of the wall. So don't assume that this Q doesn't go inside of the walls and you have to do this. You can have it inside of the wall. Oriana's Q is the man in the wall, right? Alright, so what else can I tell you about this ultimate? I think we covered at most everything about this ultimate. I think at most that's it. Right? Yeah, I think at most we covered everything, of course, about Oriana's ball. I mean, of course, this is how like a trade combo would look like. We can show it in a normal champion. So lane trades, I can show it to you guys. Like lane trades generally go something like this. Then you can look for an E. Then usually you're gonna use your ult as a finisher, of course. How to Sivir is different build. So usually you're gonna use your ult as a finisher or a gank setup, of course. But I don't know if I really have to show. Wow, this Sivir is actually like, how the hell is she so? She has a PD. She has so much mobility, man. She has so much mobility, it's unreal. But I don't know if I'm supposed to show you guys lane trades. Really, how the lane trade is not too difficult, and you guys can see it in like every single Oriana video. Okay, now let's move on. I think we pretty much like mechanically we talked about like everything really. I think at most we covered like everything. I didn't talk about her passive. Maybe you're skipping her passive. So I didn't talk about her specific passive. So her part of her passive is the ball, of course, but Oriana attacks deal additional damage, right? Per level, and also it scales with AP. Subsequent attacks against the same target within 14 seconds also deal a little bit more damage, which stacks up twice. So the more you poke the enemy melee champs, the more damage they're gonna take, which stacks up to like 2 times, right? 2 more times. This will just generally allow you to like have a bit more poke in your kit. It helps you with wave clear, but specifically if you're thinking about like destroying towers faster, it doesn't really affect towers. It actually just doesn't affect towers if you're thinking about such things. Wow, these minions are ending again. Okay, now let's go to the runes. Every single rune got nerfed. First Strike also got nerfed by 1%. Comet 80 got nerfed. Everything got nerfed except Phase Rush, which Oriana time to time does actually utilize. So we're gonna talk about runes right now. Then we can talk about builds, right? Okay, so in here there is First Strike rune. More than often you want to take First Strike in matchups where you're specifically looking to mainly scale. This will generally allow you to get your Lost Chapters slightly faster than before, which is a nice thing to have, of course. It allows you to, of course, get your power spike items a little bit faster, so this is mainly a scaling oriented rune. Generally speaking, into champs like Serat, I wouldn't recommend it because Serat has such an easy time to proc it on you, and you just get not much value out of this even outside of laning phase. So if they have stuff like Serat Ashe, then I wouldn't necessarily recommend you to actually go for First Strike. Then your goal is to, often people go 80, so 80 is a thing on Oriana because your E does actually shield, so it doesn't only works offensively, but it also provides the defensive sets of 80. So the goal of 80 is often people pick it into dashing champs, such as Yon for example, because the issue with Comet is that yes, it can deal more damage and it could scale better, that's true. Offensively, of course, it scales better than 80. But the issue with that is that it's a bit less frequent, and from the other hand, it's just all about like they could dash out of it. Like Yon has so many dashes to get out of that Comet. So even though Oriana's W does slow indeed, if there is a Yasuo for example or a Yon, you won't be able to actually consistently hit that Comet if anybody is thinking of the Comet, right? Now Comet can poke harder in situations where you can't basic attack trade, right? So okay, but Gaby, what are those matchups where I can't basic attack trade? So if you step up to basic attack into certain matchups, you're gonna get punished really hard, such as Tristana for example, or any type of matchups that are super aggro. Even Yasuo could be a good example, of course, like this type of super aggro matchups where you can barely basic attack. That's where I wouldn't recommend it, and usually into those matchups you're actually going Phase Rush. You should get Phase Rush. It also helps into the enemy team, of course, helps you to space really well, good against slows, of course. The goal of Phase Rush is, which more than often we're gonna see, of course, in like so many Oriana players utilizing Phase Rush. This is one of the top Oriana players. Is because having some extra disengage and spacing power is really good on Oriana, so it's easier to connect later on, of course, your ult because of the mobility if you want to go for a counter attack, while also it's really good into like slows in general, right? Like very strong slows like Nasus or stuff like that, you know, just an example. For example, look, like in here one of the best like Karma players did I actually go for Phase Rush. Now Karma is not the most Phase Rush matchup, right? Like you can press QW and you can most likely disengage from her W chain, right? Now the issue is not necessarily with Karma, it's really all about like she is very good at insta-proccing Phase Rush because she does this, she's back, she's insta-proccing it, right? And it allows her to disengage really easily from the Sion ult gank if it ever happens, Nunu gank, maybe Swain if he ganks, it's very easy to disengage from him, of course. So it's all about like having a safer early game overall, right? So if you feel like they got like a lots of hard collapsing roaming champs, they got the Bard, maybe they got a Thresh, that they also got a ganking jungler where you kinda need to have that extra mobility to get out of a gank, then it's easier to actually scale with phase rush. It's not necessarily only about your laning phase, because often they're gonna have champions that gonna just perma camp you, and this will allow you to disengage. Now, it's not a big necessity into every single jungle, of course, to have phase rush to escape. Some of them are you just press W, you get out, of course. So not all of the junglers are, of course, like insane at ganking, such as like, for example, like Shyvana, often you just press W into her and you just escape. So it's not always a big necessity, and you could just invest into like First Strike or other runes depending on your matchup. Fleet is something on my mind, but I won't really have an opinion about it. I don't think so it's necessarily bad on Oriana, but I won't really have an opinion about it. It's generally not used, but I can see it being like valid. Now we're gonna go, of course, to Master Plus. So Master Plus, it's usually like 80, and of course it's dominated by 80 at most, and Phase Rush. Now, even if you're going Phase Rush or 80, Scorch has a very high popularity because Oriana doesn't deal much damage early on, and it provides her some extra pressure, which is fine, but only into certain things. What does that even mean? So lots of people will go D-Shield Second Wind when it comes to melee champs, and they gonna scale anyways. Like Yasuo gonna scale into you anyways, and do too much, Scorch won't allow you to do. That's the issue with Scorch. So if you're in one of those matchups, like Tryndamere is a bit more popular in these days, where they have a lots of sustain or ways to, like, they don't really allow you to like perma-proc Scorch, because they could go for potential counter attacks. So in lanes where you're mostly scaling, even if you're going for Phase Rush or Comet or Airy, whatever, you don't necessarily always want to go Scorch, but people perma go for it. Even though, like, I know Oriana needs some extra early damage. It's not necessarily worth, because it won't allow you to do much. That's the issue. Like, you're gonna deal a bit more damage, but it doesn't exactly allow you to do much. Sometimes you force out a recall, it's true, but there is just like quite still lots of sustain in the game, and I wouldn't like necessarily recommend it, especially that the shield now got buffed, of course, so I'm not a big fan of it right now. Alternatively, speed or transcendence. Now, speed, you don't necessarily care about it. Neither really absolute focus. Mainly you want to get cooldown as much as possible. Now, often we're gonna see people gonna take MR or Armor, which are totally fine into strong AP or AD champs. Now, you could also arguably go in non-interactive matchups, HP scaling, which again can be totally fine. Some people also take Presence of Mind and Coup de Grace. Usually people take it into melee matchups where they sort of wanna have as much mana as possible, so they can harass even more, while also they maintain their mana. Usually hard melee matchups like K'Sante mid, if they ever go K'Sante mid. But generally speaking, more than often you wanna go for scaling runes such as Magical Footwear, and if you're scaling, of course, then you can go for stuff like Magical Footwear with Gathering Storm, right? I'm gonna also like as we can see, like in here I went for Stopwatch. You can go for Stopwatch as well if you value having an Azanye as quick as possible, while also like the activatable is very valuable in the game. But this could also be arguably changed to the other one, of course, right? Magical Footwear. Now, from the other hand, Approach Velocity. What the hell? Why does he have Approach Velocity? So it's actually not necessarily bad on Oriana. This is the speed you're gonna have when you walk towards someone, 423. Now, of course, in lane, if you won't have boots, that's fine. If you won't have boots, then I'm gonna show you guys how much speed we have without boots. I QW this guy. I didn't W, 374. So, okay, but how is this useful, Gaby? So this is actually quite good to get close a little better, so you can actually swing in more basic attacks in matchups where you're looking to be more aggro, even though you took First Strike. It allows you to harass a little better, right? The more basic attacks you can swing in, the more damage you can deal, which is arguably actually better than having a Scorch, because if Scorch doesn't allow you to swing in extra basic attacks, then at the end of the day you would deal more damage just out of having more speed. Now also you can sidestep abilities if you walk forward but sideways, right? So these sidesteps are a little bit more potent, so you're gonna look like a better mechanical player on Oriana if you can sidestep in such way. For example, if you face a Serat, really good example. Or not necessarily Serat, because you maybe don't wanna go for into Serat is so long range, you maybe don't wanna go for this first strike. But if you face some type of mid-range champion like Ari, one of the best examples, right? Now what does Ari want to do? She wants to hit her charm and her Q and all of that skill shots, right? Now if you want to go for an aggressive turn, it's easier to sidestep in such way her EQ, right? Because the faster you move, the easier it is to sidestep her ability. And that will allow you to go for an aggressive move once she misses her combo. So this is sort of a thing that allows you to go for more so mechanical outplays with your sidesteps, right? Okay, next. So do we go for ability power to ability power? Do we go for one attack speed? How does it go, Gaby? What should I do? So for beginners, I would always recommend go for attack speed. It helps you a lot to last it, of course, to swing in more basic attacks for more DPS. So there will be some matchups that are ranged into range matchups. I would highly recommend you guys to actually not take attack speed, just to take double AP, because often this is all you will do. You won't even basic attack a brain champion. Often this is what you will do. And so the basic attack frequency doesn't like matters too much into certain matchups where you're just like turbo short trading, like let's say you throw in a QW basic attack, right? Like it just won't be that concerning. But more so what will happen is that it's like you value to have a teensy bit more damage on QW and your first basic attack, right? Because all of these scale with AP and maybe your E as well if you hit your E. So you care a little bit more about like having just ability damage, not necessarily basic attack speed, right? Okay, now let's move on. What do you take? Futures market, or do you actually want to go for the other rune? How's it called? Minion dematerializer. So does Oriana need minion dematerializer? So when to go for futures market, when to go for minion dematerializer. So minion dematerializer allows you to shove waves way more smoothly, right? Which generally means that you can actually roam a little more often. So in low elo, I would always recommend it over futures market. Because look, often if you get a priority by shoving, you will be allowed to roam really easily, right? Or also you can deny a possible roam from a Talon, because the way we shove, then you're gonna get his plates, and then it's just not the best timing for him to roam, right? That's another thing to be considerate of. So minion dematerializer is widely not used at all on Oriana, even if they go inspiration second. Although Oriana's wave clear is not the best. I have like of course points in my ult and all of that, but if I reset the game, we can visually see it with our eyes that she actually does not have like the greatest wave clear in the game, right? We buy something, of course. Can just buy boots, whatever, and I gonna go to lane, right? I gonna be level 6 now. The minions, of course, are a little bit like, they don't have like the most HP right now, of course, in the game, but we can see it with our eyes. If I have like few points in my QW, we actually won't have just like the best possible clear. That's the issue. We have actually 8 yet. Oh, so gathering some doesn't resets when the game resets. Okay, that's weird, but generally speaking, if you hover your mouse over these abilities, you will see that they don't have a good, they don't have the best wave clear in the game. So that's where like minion dematerializer will help you. I would pretty much always recommend it over futures market. Pretty much always, because I think futures market is nerfed. So at most, like maybe in like just hard scaling matchups, you could just aim to actually not. But I feel like minion dematerializer is just always better in my opinion. Now approach velocity or cosmic insight. Another one. So when do you want to go for approach velocity and when do you want to go for cosmic insight? In my opinion, I would always go for approach velocity, just because of the mobility and being able to like sort of go for outplays. It's really nice to have. But what does cosmic insight allow you to do? Cosmic insight gives you cooldown on Luden's Echo. You have less cooldown on it, and also cooldown on abilities, and decreases a little bit the cooldown of summoner spells such as Flash TP, right? So it means that you will have your TP up way more frequently than your opponent. And you can go for more TP plays, or either like, let's say you wanna like, you can go for more frequent, let's say like, or flash plays, right? So arguably you could actually like, go for those type of plays more frequently. So it allows you to go for more plays on the map, but provides way less like laning phase power. So I would always just maximize out laning phase with approach velocity, except if you can't really do that. If you can't really do that into like turbo range matchups where you can't really hit QWR that frequently, then I would say yeah, just don't go for it into mainly scaling matchups and just aim to maximize out those R flashes or those type of like TP plays, you know, TP bot, or after like level 10 of course you can TP wards, everything actually that you can TP. So then you'll be able to like go for more plays on the map. But if you wanna play for laning phase, or if you can play for laning phase, I would say go for approach velocity of course. It definitely helps you a lot into like sidestepping stuff like Yon Q as well, or Yasuo Q if you hate those type of champions of course. Those abilities can do quite a lot of damage, especially if they knock you up. Okay, now I think at most I explained these runes. Which rune didn't I explain? I think I explained even the eerie ones, the phase rush ones, the subsequent runes. What should you go for, what should you not go for? Now one thing I didn't really talk about is biscuits. So biscuits can be totally fine on Oriana. Now when do you wanna go for biscuits though? Biscuits gives you extra mana early on and HP, right? So when you use it, you're gonna get extra mana and HP, but preferably you should use it when you're low on mana on HP. It's not like a potion, because it scales, right, with your missing HP and mana, right? So you don't wanna insta use it. But also you're gonna actually get some bonus mana when you ate all of your biscuits, right? This is more so a laning phase tool. If you feel like you suck in matchups like Sirat or something, definitely go for it so you don't get stomped. It's good for beginners, even in matchups where you're not supposed to go for them. That's totally fine. Or in matchups where you sort of need more early game power. In matchups where it's like trade's gonna be more interactive and you want to have enough sort of like early game power to either look for some potential type of roams, invades, or just to like sort of outmatch your opponent or match their like strong early game without the neediness to actually like TP and go back. So usually into like more volatile matchups I would say yeah, go for biscuits. They are definitely good. I would recommend it. Otherwise you could go for scaling stuff like magical footwear if it's not a big necessity, because both you and the enemy laner will just mostly scale, so it's not really like that big of a deal. What else? Is there something I forgot to mention? People don't really go nullifying orb. I don't feel like you necessarily need it on Oriana. Don't really have an opinion about it. I mean, it provides you extra protection into a Fizz. If you face Fizz, maybe you could go for it. If you feel like you're really bad, you could go for this and barrier, but it's not really recommended in my opinion. Like, I don't really like it. But you could arguably go for this and for bomb plating and overgrowth into a Fizz, of course. So if you feel like you're kind of like scared of a Fizz, of course you can do that, but it's not too recommended by me, of course, but you can totally do that. So usually I wouldn't recommend reserve second, only like in extreme cases, and depends how well you can play the matchup. For example, even in high elo, people don't necessarily go resolve into champs like Fizz or something that's strong early on. Maybe you can get it into a Tristana, I suppose, bomb plating, but generally speaking I don't really like these type of runes unless you are really like forced to like get them, like into Tristana. I would say you could get them or into this type of like very aggro all-in matchups, of course, even though Tristana is ranged, she is quite short range, so she will definitely like force some type of all-ins, so it's good into all-ins, of course, but it's a bit unrecommended by me, because it's like I would just more than often just go biscuits instead of these like more so like resolve tanky runes. Honestly, I don't know how to feel about them. Okay, now let's move on. We already explained these. Hex Flash is not really a thing you wanna get on Oriana. These got at most explained. Time Warp Tonic doesn't really exist in our current meta just because it's just like kinda shit in these days. Like it used to be more meta, but these days it's just kinda shit. Now, alternatively, Ultimate Hunter, Cheap Shot or Taste of Blood. Would you go for this? Is it worth to go for? So look, what does this rune page provide you? You could go even arguably for cheap shot. So what does this rune page allow you to do? It's about snowballing, right? It's about stomping people quite hard early on. For example, you could go cheap shot, Scorch. into certain melee matchups. You could even get one of these as well, so that you can poke even harder. Now those runes will allow you to have a better early game and more frequent ultimates if you feel like you're gonna get kills with Ultimate Hunter. So for example, if your champion in the jungle is something like Kha'Zix, Rengar, they are snowbally champions, right? So for you, it's not a necessity to get a kill, you only have to get an assist, right? So if there is a jungle champion that's sort of snowbally, and they also have like synergy with your ultimate like Rengar or Kha'Zix, just by EWing them, you're gonna get an assist. So then I would say if you have a snowbally jungle, this is recommended by me, like totally go for it. And you don't necessarily need like biscuits, or you don't necessarily need biscuits to like sort of survive. Then this is usually way better in lower ranks where you're gonna get a bunch of kills, and in higher ranks I would just like mainly recommend it if you feel like you have like some type of snowbally jungle that will allow you to get those like stacks, right? And you're also like sort of not lane locked permanently by your laner, because they just like perma shove and then you're kinda lane locked and it's kinda hard to get stacks. But it's definitely like recommended if you're kinda like looking to like win through a laning phase with Cheap Shot, Scorch and one of these runes, depending on the matchup. Or just go for Taste of Blood instead of in case you are in a range matchups, because it provides you extra sustain. But preferably they don't need to be like very long range like Serat, because on a Serat it's hard to get like Taste of Blood stacks per usual of course. Now, okay, at most we did explain what the hell was the background noise? Okay, so at most we explained the mechanics. Right now we explained the runes, we explained the items, not yet. So, okay, Gabe, what the hell do I buy on this champion? Okay, so items. Should you buy boots? Should you rush boots? Should you get tier? Should you get... So, should you get Ionian boots? Should you get Sork shoes? Which are the boots of choice? Should you get Merc threads? Sometimes you do actually want to get Merc threads if they have a lot of CC, right? Let's go to Merc threads. If they have a lot of CC, tenacity is good into that. And magic damage, right? So generally into magic damage and CC champs, if they have target access on you, Merc threads could really be easily be recommended, of course. But Oriana does already have some defensive items that she can build, such as Zonye and Seraphs. So in extreme cases, you could arguably go Merc threads. Now, what about plated silk caps? Is it the thing? Would you go for it? Not really, because you can already go Zonye, so it's not really recommended by me. But generally speaking, you wanna go mostly go Sork shoes or Ionian boots. Now, when do you go for what? So look, I want you guys to see it with your eyes. The differences, of course, you're gonna place down a dummy. It's not really about like giving it like thousands of armor and MR and HP. Just like an eye check, of course, guys. Just an eye check. So look, this is sort of my all-in with QW ult, right? We can see that with the alt 748. Now, if we go for Ionian boots, right? Let's wait up first strike, of course. We can totally wait it up, of course. It's fine. 748, right? Now we're gonna deal less damage with Ionian, right? We dealt less damage with Ionian, as we saw it, of course. And so what does that even mean? It means that you're gonna have more DPS due to the frequency of your ultimate, right? And more utility, because you can use your 2 utility spells more often. So generally speaking, this is a DPS oriented build. When you are a bit more tank and you value a bit more DPS out of your abilities, of course, you're gonna have a bit more peel, a little bit more of that, of course. And tier, now let's just talk about, of course, like base items as well. We're gonna talk about base items of what do you start with. Do you start tier? Do you start ring? Do you start this? But first of all, I wanna cover a little bit the bigger items. Then we're gonna start to talk about starter items, of course. So, okay. Ludens Echo. So when do you go Luton's Echo, when do you go for Liandry? Now this is a simple logic. Luton's Echo is good at providing you mobility, and it does actually have lots of like magic penetration and a flat amount of 124 damage, which will allow you to have more damage into like swishes. You're gonna have a bit more upfront burst. Now Liandry is more so a thing, right? We're gonna click on Liandry's Torment. It's a DPS oriented item. It even provides more cooldown, which means that the more cooldown you have, the more frequently you can use your abilities to reapply that Liandry and have more DPS. So this is sort of a tool, right? It's sort of a item that will allow you to deal more damage into champions that stack HP. Now watch out, I didn't say tanks, right? I didn't say tanks because a mage like Vladimir or Swain can really easily stack HP, right? And once they stack HP, the more HP they stack, the same way Liandry will scale as well, because it can deal up to 12% bonus damage to champions, based on the target's bonus health, of course, while also it does like 1% HP based damage, right? You could, yes, so that's like pretty much it about, right? Like you could really easily like build it even into Swains and Vladimirs. They don't necessarily have to be like, they don't necessarily need to have this type of spear of Sojin Gordrinker, Bruisers, or top lane tanks, of course. It's totally fine to build it into like HP stacking mages. Okay, or Sylas, right? Like Sylas is also sort of a battle mage, but it does build a lot of HP. Okay, so beside of the mythics, what do you build? So you want to get Seraph second, right? So you get your mythic of choice, and you want to get an early tier, right? Like you want to get an early tier, then aim to get an Archangel staff. Because of Archangel staff, you'll get lots of AP, mana, a bit of cooldown, HP, big shield, like everything, you know, like everything that's on this item is good for you. It's good for Oriana, so it's something that you should actually always go for, pretty much. I don't think so you would ever like to skip this item, just because everything this provides is just like insane. It's great on Oriana, it's really needed. By the time you actually like get this item finished, usually you're gonna be around level 11. Of course, depends how fat you are. Now, should you ever go for Shadow Flame, Zanye? Shadow Flame is highly unrecommended. Now, why do I even say this? Now, usually people say that well, look, Gaby, champions that don't have high AP scalings, they usually go for Shadow Flame over Rabadon. Now, not a long time ago, recently her AP scalings got a little bit buffed. And so, even so, still as a third item, you would actually go for Rabadon, because it will actually provide you more DPS overall than the other item, Shadow Flame. Now, it's true that Shadow Flame is cheaper, but it's actually not better than alternative cheaper items such as Zanya in certain situations. A scaling Void Staff in case they stack MR, of course. And don't think about, oh, they have shields, now you should go for Shadow Flame. That's just a bait. Now, alternatively, in some extreme cases, you could even go Banshee. Horizon Focus, is it bad, is it good? It's very similar to Shadow Flame. Their damage is similar as a third item actually, but the good thing about Horizon Focus is that it actually does reveal people. Now, it doesn't reveal invisible people, just to be clear, right? But it does reveal people that are in a bush, right? So it's written on the ability. The ability that triggers Hypershot also benefits from the damage increase. Pets and non-immobilizing traps do not trigger this effect. Only the initial placements of zone abilities will trigger this effect. Distance is measured from the ability's cast point. So what does it mean? Oh my god, practice is ending. So it means that you will proc it. You will proc it if you go for a maximum range Q. But okay, Gaby, what if I'm not in maximum range? Then you will not proc it, but don't worry, because your W is a slow, so it works on slows as well. You don't necessarily have to be over that 700 cast range, right? You don't necessarily have to be over it, so don't be worried. Of course, this will definitely work out. It also provides like cooldown, so it means again you're gonna have more DPS than as if you would have with Shadow Flame. Okay, now Morella Monicon. I don't really recommend it to build it on Oriana, even though you can AoE apply it. I don't really like to build it on carries, but if you really need anti-heal and nobody else gives a shit, you could go for it, but not my thing. Rally, never really go for it. Magi, Dark Seal, you could go for a Dark Seal into Magi. Once you've had like 10 stacks, you could really easily go for Magi's. While also you can get a Dark Seal early on, of course, beside your Doran's Ring. Now, in these days, I would highly recommend to actually go for Doran's Ring, just because Doran's items are so strong. And if you would actually go for Tier as a first item, it feels like you would be dominated by a Doran's Blade user or Doran's Ring or whatever they use. I think you won't be able to match so easily Tier early game. That's my opinion. So generally speaking, I feel like these days you need to actually start with a Doran's Ring item. So, now, are these items viable at all? Now, Crown has some validity. I don't know what to tell you guys. Zanye already exists, so generally speaking, I would just go for Zanye. I wouldn't even go for this item. You can go Zanye, because it will cut a lot of your damage compared to not having like Liandry or Luden. So if they have like lots of champs that are sort of like Zed, even though Zed can proc it if you're cautious enough, it doesn't. Champs like Rengar, like it does counter a specific type of champs, you know? So it's actually kind of like an exhaust put on yourself that lasts 2.5 seconds. So it's sort of good into Katarina, this type of champs. Katarina, of course, Katarina's all in and things like that in general. But there are lots of champs that already get countered by Zanye, just you need to time it. So it's sort of a thing, I would say, if you're bad at using Zanye, you could go for it, but I'm not really a big fan of Crown on Oriana, because it will just feel like you lack damage and you're a bit more tank, but I'm not too big of a fan of it, honestly. Now, Nashor Tooth, I think it's a for fun item. I wouldn't necessarily recommend you to do this, because more than often you won't be able to like swing in so much basic attacks to the point where you're just gonna be a DPS oriented champion. Your DPS comes out of your abilities really, not necessarily out of your basic attacks, so I'm not a big fan of it. Another useful item, Cosmic Drive, rather underrated. So what does Cosmic Drive allow you to do? Now, just to be clear, I already have, of course, approach velocity, right? So right now, it will allow you to pretty much just like be a fast fellow, of course. It's quite easy to proc it. And Oriana's kit already has mobility, which generally means that it's very easy to actually like perma have it, right? To perma be in combat, because as we can see it with our eyes, it's written on the damaging an enemy champion generates 2.5 movement speed every 1.5 seconds. So it applies on your basic attacks as well, of course. It doesn't necessarily has to be like a whatever ability, right? You have to just damage it. For example, if you build like a Liandry, I do believe it maintains it, but let's see, because I'm not 100% sure. It does actually give you stacks. Liandry does actually give you stacks, right? So that's actually kinda good to have, although it's not like too insane, but you're gonna stack it slightly faster, of course. It does give you stacks, but it doesn't maintain it, right? So this is the tool you wanna use if you want to have a bit more DPS than per usual. This is a DPS item, by the way. Well, also while you're having a lots of mobility, because either you have to kite people, because of their like kit, right? Like you want to disengage, or this allows you to be way more wiggly and way more likely to go for outplay, sidestep oriented outplays, of course. So this item is highly recommended if they have a sort of a team that's quite good at engaging on you, and you don't really have like a peeling support like Janna. You have like a shitty support that just doesn't really peels you, you know, like Senna or something, you know, that doesn't really allow you to disengage. So some games like mobility is the most valuable thing. Even though like Oriana has her own ways to disengage, sometimes you may need an extra layer of mobility and disengage. That's when you wanna get, of course, so usually you wanna get it after Seraph, of course. Then there are some rare scenarios where you wanna get this, but generally not to recommend that. Now, Demonic Embrace, again, rare situational item. If you are insanely tank, you need some extra like anti-tank item, then you could go arguably for Demonic's Embrace, which will just generally allow you to like deal more damage into them, but it's not usually like an Oriana item, more so like a Bruiser Mordekaiser item, but I could see it in like very rare games when they have a lots of like extreme HP stackers. Now, what else is there to talk about? I didn't really talk about too much of a macro play. We talked about micro play. Now, okay, so what kind of macro plays can you go for? Should we go for some macro plays? We can go for some macro plays just really quick at the end of the video, of course. So, let's go back to Oriana really quick. As we have TP, we can go for macro plays, but if you don't want to complicate it for yourself, if you're a beginner, in my opinion, you could totally get a barrier in matchups like that, or you could get an ignite, of course, if you want to be more aggressive. If you don't want it, if you don't want the game to be more complicated, but you can go TP as well. Like totally, you could go for offensive summoner spells, but you can just go TP as well and just like play for your team. So what kind of macro plays can we go for, and what should we do with this champion? You can, as I said, like your side laning is not necessarily bad if you're ahead, but you won't be able to split, you're just mostly gonna clear waves, of course. So again, your ball is really your sort of a macro tool, because it allows you to go for different like vision control and sort of like vision control and macro plays along, right? So because like you are sort of a mage that has like a good vision control, you are allowed to actually like have vision in bushes that normally other mages wouldn't so easily have, right? Now from the other hand, your goal as Oriana macro wise early on is to queue this bush, depending on which side you are, of course, and you want to sneak in a ward like this. Now as late as possible, of course, not as early as possible, as late as possible, around when the red is spawned. Now why would you do that? So we can clearly see vision on this side, right? And we can clearly see vision on this side because of our body, so we could safe to say that we could sneak in a ward really quick and leave the area, right? Now what does this ward allow you to do? If we are in a matchup like that, we get to push. Now what does it allow us to do if we push? For example, the enemy jungle, just do this, starts on the red, then he will clear level, he will clear for his cracks, right? Then he will be still level 2 around raptors, but if you are wise enough and tricky enough, you're pushing the wave, as I said early on, right? Simple game plan, you're pushing the wave, harassing the enemy mid laner, my bad. And accordingly to the enemy's clear, you can actually sneak in a QW and you could steal 2 raptors. Now what happens if you steal 2 raptors? You deal some damage with your QW early on, so it's not hard to like steal 2 raptors, and if the enemy jungler is not good at collapsing, or they already gave up their dash ability, for example you saw like Zac King in, but usually they don't even make their E on Zac as a as a second ability, of course. But if you are this like, if you can't really be collapsed on too easily, then you want to actually just like go in, sneak 2 raptors away, you can even basic attack them. And okay Gaby, but what does that allow you to do? What happens? So the enemy jungler will be level 2, stuck on level 2, and he only gonna get level 3 of the wolves, which means generally speaking he gonna be at the XP deficit, which means that his clear will be slowed down because he doesn't have his third ability into the wolves. Okay, but what do I do right after? So if it's ever possible and you have proper priorities and your jungler is willing to invade and he's patting also downwards, you could actually look for a potential invade in here, because his clear will be delayed. You could also blast on yourself really easily, right, in here with your jungle, right, like your jungle is here, or this is like a very good collapse angle, of course, and approximately when he's doing, of course, his thing, right, that depends, of course, where your jungle is and how quickly he clears, of course, but you could either blast go in here or in here, depending on the clear speed of the enemy jungle, of course. Okay, but how the hell do I know? How do I know if the enemy jungler is in the wall of it? How do I know if he is inside of this area? Are there some exact things you can tell me? Because usually people are not level 2 around wolves, right? When they're clearing it, when they already got these camps, right? So, you don't have to overthink it too hard, because your ball reveals the enemy champion. They are on top of the wolves, and you can hit your QW, right? You don't have to overthink, but you don't want to upfront QW, you just want to like Q, and then you can of course buffer your W inside of it. Like you can buffer your W inside of it, of course, but it's not that big of a deal. It really depends, like of course, like if you can, like first of all you want to Q in to see if they're there, and then you want to W. Now, for example, I would probably like know it from like my own like head, like if he already finished the wolves or not, or if he's on this camp, but it's really easy to just ward it or check it, you know, if your jungle of course has a ward or something, so that's very easy to do. Then blast going in. Okay, now displays on what's next. If your bot has prio, it's way more preferable to do that, of course. If it doesn't, and they have something like Pike to collapse on your team, then it might be risky. So those are the times I would say, yeah, maybe wouldn't recommend it. I would say maybe I wouldn't recommend it because also, by the way, one thing I forgot to mention, you can actually buffer your W inside of your Q. Just like makes it slightly faster, of course. You can even like buffer your ult. You can't actually buffer your ult, so something actually I forgot to mention. That's why I said like some niche things I don't 100% know about, of course, like every single champion. Okay, so then what happens? Then what happens in lane? Let's say you're level 3, level 4. Your goal quite often in low elo is actually just to shove and roam. It sounds brainless. You shove, you roam for the scuttle scrap early on, you shove, you roam top lane if you have a range top like an action or a lane bully like Rumble. You can also always move your camera and see how much HP the enemy top has, which means that you'll see if you can roam or you don't wanna roam there, of course it depends. But definitely should you move your camera top lane, check their HP bot lane. It's especially important after 6 because after 6 you unlock your ultimate and it's way easier to roam on people. It doesn't necessarily have to be a dive, it can just be a plain roam because you speed yourself up, you walk in, you ult of course. So Oriana is not necessarily a bad ganker, especially if your jungle also plays along. Okay, Gaby, but what else would you do? These are not opportunities for me. So, Oriana's DPS is not necessarily bad due to her short cooldowns. So, and her basic attacks, of course, dealing a teensy bit extra amount of damage, similar to Kayle. Which means that you'll be able to secure Drakes quite nicely. Now, arguably some champs like Malzahar have similar clear speed into Drakes, but generally mages like Serrat and all of those champs are not necessarily faster at clearing Drakes with your team, because they don't necessarily have the frequency and the low mana costs as Oriana does have, but also they don't have like this passive that provides continuous DPS into Drakes and Heralds and what have you. Now, okay. Laning phase, let's say laning phase finishes. As I said, like alternative place you can go for is just really easily just to E your jungler, right? Select per moment, like clear them. You can E your Shaco, your Rengar, your Kha'Zix, your whatever, and then they're gonna go in, and once they're invisible, right? You're gonna ult them, right? I just like used my E on the second dummy just as a, of course, I just showcasing it. Those are the type of like plays you can do with your jungle in lane, of course, but mainly I want to talk about like macro, like what else do you do. When it comes to like securing objectives, as I said before, you gotta smartly position your ball and mainly just aim to have it actually on your engager when the enemy team is around. So actually, if you can, don't perma shield like someone that's not necessarily to be shielded, just perma shield the engager if you want to, if you're doing Baron. Or just like hold it on them, because even into like holding into is quite important to like do so, right? Okay, now what else can you do with this champion? Your wave clear later on won't necessarily be bad. So as I said, like when it comes to side laning, you're not necessarily shit at doing so, because your W will provide lots of mobility to collapse on the whatever side laner they have with your jungle, or it will sort of allow you to wave clear, so even if your jungler is not allowed, you can like push outside waves. Alternatively to that, you're mainly a teamfight champion, which means as much as you can, of course, you should aim to force Drakes if your team is not like turbo behind or they're like not absolutely shit at team fighting. So you should aim actually just to like you team fight, of course. You are looking for picks if you can. So even for looking for picks is not necessarily a bad thing. So sometimes you can ask for a shadowing if you're side laning. You have actually options with Oriana, of course, on what you want to do and what you can do. Now, is there anything like macro-wise you should really watch out for? You're actually okay at like escaping ganks. Not the best, but like you're quite good at actually like at escaping ganks. Not like LeBlanc good, but you're not like awful at it. So even if your side laning is not necessarily bad, is there something else? I feels like I'm just filling this video. Gotta think a teensy bit again, guys. Gotta think a teensy bit. Get most like I think get mostly covered like everything, right? Scuttle roams, potential dives, potential plays, potential invades, of course, here and there. Now what else is there to talk about? I think that's I mean that's like pretty much it, right? Like Recall timings, of course, are quite important, but pretty much it like you gotta aim to, of course, like reset on this champion in time, because this champion also relies on like items to scale up. But I don't know if that's like really a thing I should really mention in here, of course. What else? I don't suppose there is too much else, right? I don't suppose there is too much else to cover actually. Well, with macro there are always like, of course, like different plays you can get done based on if you have Baron or something. So again, like you can hover, of course, your side laner, like you can do like plenty of things when it comes to like Baroning. But these are not like specific like Oriana macro tips I would give you. It's just like average macro things that you need to do. So I wanted to like say something that like Oriana is more so like specific at doing than like someone else, right? Um, Not much else I can think of actually, right? Like usually like playing around your team and waiting for your team is a thing before objectives if you're rushing in, so you're not really a 1v9 champion, you rely on them. If that's like something you're not doing, but I think at most that's yeah, I think at most that's it. So this is like a 1 hour video. I think that's it for now, guys. Have a nice day.